right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lara Deutsch. I am one of the co-founders of Where Music Leads with my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Cindy Tong and Dr. Amy Hillis. Our mission as an arts organization is to normalize a wider range of career paths and broaden the definition of success in today's music industry. So that is what we're going to be doing with our talks, or trying to do at least with our talks this weekend. Before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining. If it's your first session with us, welcome. If it's not your first session this weekend, or if you've been with us the past 2 years, welcome back and thank you for being here. I want to say a big thank you to our collaborative partner, National Youth Orchestra of Canada, for being an amazing teammate and for making this happen with us, as well as our supporter, the RBC Foundation, and sponsor, Long and McQuaid Musical Instruments. A shout out, of course, also to our wonderful tech manager for the weekend, Lauren Drew. For those of you who haven't joined us before, a couple of housekeeping things. This is, of course, a webinar format. So that means that the only cameras and audio on will be the host and panelists, but there are still ways that you can interact, and we do encourage that you do. You can feel free to type in the chat. I see a little bit of that already. Say, hey, I'm watching from Toronto, or hey, I'm in Peru. Nice to be here. If you like something that the panelists have said, feel free to chime in. That said, if you want to ask a question, and we would love to have as many questions as possible, please do feel free to put that in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can direct it to all of the panelists or a specific panelist, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as possible by the end of the session, about in the last 20 minutes or so. If at any point you want to learn more about our speakers or the schedule for the weekend, please feel free to check out our website at www.wheremusicleads.com. So our topic today is presenting music, broadcasters, recording engineers, and artistic directors. So we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of how it is that people in these positions choose the music that they choose to present, whether it's in a concert series or for radio broadcast or for recording. At the same time, our panelists have really, really varied and dynamic careers. They do a lot of different things. They're very experienced freelancers. So I want to get to that a little bit as well, learning how they started on their career path and how they got to where they are now. So please, again, if you have questions about any of that, at any point, feel free to enter those in the Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers one by one. I'm going to start with the wonderful Denise Ball. So Denise has been at the center of Canada's classical music scene for over 3 decades. She's got such a plethora of skills. She's a wonderful person also. She was a longtime creative producer for the CBC Radio Orchestra. She's won Grammys. In fact, the Grammy that the music that you heard at the beginning is the Grammy that she won for a recording with James Ennis and the Vancouver Symphony. She was the executive producer of classical music for CBC Radio for a long time, and now she is actually the artistic director of the Coast Recital Society in Seychelles, BC. So again, many different hats, many talents. And as an aside, she's a very talented bio writer. I've had the pleasure of working with her on writing my bio from a more artistic perspective. So thank you very much for being here, Denise. Next, we have Isaac Page. Isaac is a Toronto-based composer, conductor, and associate producer on CBC Music. He is the founding artistic director of The Stacks, which is an ensemble dedicated to performing unknown and unheard works of the 20th century. He's also, just casually, a poet and a lyricist, having released 3 EPs as a singer-songwriter named Isaac under the name Isaac Hunter. He has a degree in composition as well as a master's in orchestral conducting, and he's just got, again, a very wide range of skills and things that he does in his career. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Isaac. Thanks for being here. And finally, we have James Clemens-Seely. James is a music and sound specialist, also an educator. He is an assistant professor of sound recording at McGill University since 2023, and also used to work as a recording engineer at the Banff Center. He's worked on Juno-winning albums, had Grammy nominations, movie soundtracks seen on Netflix, Disney, basically everywhere you've heard sound. And he's here to share, again, his experience with all of those different roles that he plays, and also how his background to music kind of got him to where he is today. Hi, James. Thanks for being here. So one by one, I'm just going to ask you to give us a quick overview of generally what you're doing in your day-to-day and how you got into this business. Let's start with Denise. Oh, I think we have potentially lost Denise. She might be frozen. Okay. While our tech sorts that out, let's jump over to James.
All right. So yeah, as you said, I'm a part-time professor at McGill, part-time freelancer, doing sort of anything and everything that comes my way. Um, so the day-to-day for me is delightfully varied because some days it's in the classroom, some days it's in a studio, some days it's driving out to the boonies to set up a recording studio in a church to make an album. Sometimes it's traveling for work or a conference or anything. Sometimes it's working at home in my pajamas, frantically mixing the music for a film that's supposed to be delivered tomorrow. And yeah, I from high school when I knew that I wanted to do music, uh, you know, fully. I also knew that I needed it to be a varied version of that, and so it's really been great. And then I guess yeah, what got me here was just an addiction to music and variety and maybe an attention deficit. So it had to be varied and a passion for gizmos, I guess, and sort of following my nose according to those drives to here.
Amazing. I have some follow-up questions, but I'm going to take a little time to get to know each panelist first. Isaac, can you tell us how you got where you are today?
I sometimes wonder how I got to where I got. At CBC, I've been working at CBC Music now for 3.5 years, or just about. And my day to day there, I
Ah,
program Tempo and About Time, which are the two weekday Monday to Friday classical shows.
right.
Uh, and uh, a lot of the days, that is the bedrock that has to happen every single day, and everything else kind of gets stacked on top of it. Um, my journey comes through, like, I grew up in a musical family. Music's always been a part of my life, and then as I went through school, I was aiming for a performance career as a conductor, and I still do conduct and perform that way. But when the pandemic happened and cut off my final semester of grad school, I ended up just happenstance picking up a couple uh, uh, one gig here and one gig here, doing a little bit of music journalism, and built up a little bit of portfolio and a little bit of confidence so that when a job opened up at CBC Music, I felt like I wasn't unqualified,
Right.
and found my way in here, and it's been a great fit ever since.
That's amazing because it sounds like that was not the original plan, but it was
No,
an
no,
amazing path that opened up
it
because
was
of
one
what
that
you
I
did.
didn't think was possible, truly, but
Right.
I found my way in here.
I'm so excited to hear more about that story because
Yeah,
I think that is the case with a lot of the professionals we've already seen this weekend too, is they never dreamed that they would be where they are now. But you know, you never know what's going to happen. And it's kind of the skills that all the amalgamation of things you learn along the way that get you there
yeah.
in the end. Before we get into our conversation, I think we have Denise back. Denise, can you hear us?
I
Amazing.
can. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I was just asking these guys, just if you can tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are and your career and what your
Well,
day-to-day looks like now.
sure. Well, I think I'm here somewhat under false pretenses because I suspect I'm the only person involved in this conversation that doesn't have a music degree. I started off being a violinist, and I loved being a violinist, but at about the age of when I was at 16 or 17, I realized that performance anxiety ruled, and
Right.
I was not going to have a career. And if I did have a career, it would be, third desk player in a B orchestra. And I didn't really want that. I was very interested in writing, though. So I went and got an English degree. I put myself through university playing, but mostly in ensembles, and
Hmm.
then a degree in journalism. And I started off as a cub reporter at the Regina Leader Post. That grew into doing freelance work for the CBC when they introduced what was then known as the stereo service. Um, and eventually I got a job working at the CBC doing feature production and music production in Regina. It was a great place to be because nobody in Toronto paid any attention to what I was doing. So I could make every mistake in the book. Um, and I was very lucky to kind of just learn on the job.
Right.
From there, I began concentrating more and more on being a recording producer, and I carried on my career at the CBC in Vancouver, and then to Calgary, and then a few years in Toronto, and then back to Vancouver, where I had the dream job of a lifetime running the CBC Radio Orchestra, until the powers that be decided we didn't need one of those anymore, which I thought was a huge error, but they weren't listening to me. I left the CBC 5 years ago, sort of mid-pandemic, realizing I'm done. And no, now I carry on doing record production. I run a little music series in Seashell. In fact, I'm going there this afternoon. And as you said in my introduction, I write bios, because one of the things that became very apparent when I was at the CBC is that I would get a bio a day from some musician, and every single one of them started with, Tootie Sprott is the finest kazoo player of her generation. And I thought if I saw that phrase one more time, I was going to do something I would regret. So I kind of went on a campaign to help musicians write their story, and to have a bio that is much more story based than a list of where you played and who you studied with.
I love that, Denise. And I now I really notice it too now, having worked with you. I see how pervasive those bios are, and you end up not learning anything about the actual artist. I see Isaac nodding heartily. So that actually leads me quite well into the first thing I want to ask all of you, sort of as presenter hats. So what do you look for in an artist when you're choosing to present them? So Isaac, if you're putting them on the radio, or Denise, you're putting them in your concert series, or James, like you're choosing who you actually want to spend your recording time with. Like what most stands out when you get so many, I'm sure you get so many demos that come across your desk. Isaac, do you want to jump in first?
Sure thing. I mean, I'm coming at it where there's already a finished product in front of me. The artist is submitting a recording. And what makes me want to listen to it is, do I know who this person is? And can I get a sense of them through their bio? Do they fit in with what we're trying to promote? And in the case of CBC Music and the shows I do, it's a lot of Canadian artists. Is it somebody that is active in some part of the country? And especially if it's not someone, I'm really interested in people that are not international figures, that are not just in Toronto, that are not just in Montreal. And then also, what is the music? Is it stuff that we've heard a million times before? And if it is, does it offer something, a different approach to it, or something unique in itself?
Right.
Or is it unheard music, less heard music of marginalized composers, Canadian contemporary music in general? Is there another story to tell through the music itself? Because I could put anything on the radio, but it's up to Tom or Julie to actually make it interesting to the listener. There has to be some story guiding that material. And then, the last thing I'm going to say, but maybe one of the most important things, is that it still has to sound good.
Right.
It still has to be a good recording.
Right.
And that some artists I find take a couple goes before it really gets to that level.
Right. That makes sense. Denise, what's that experience like for you? I mean, you've also been in the same position as Isaac, but certainly as a concert presenter, I'm sure you get many more proposals than you are able to fill slots. So what are the ones that really stand out?
Well, I'll just reiterate what Isaac said about being able to tell a story, which is essential in broadcasting. I mean, you have to be able to say something. And it's so much better if you can actually wrap your ideas around presentation that does give us a narrative. Quite honestly, I think in concert presentation, it's almost the same thing. And I'll reiterate again what Isaac said about it has to be a little bit different. Don't come flogging the same repertoire, a concert program that takes one thing from column A and one thing from column B and one thing from column C and sort of jams them together and says, here's my program. I want to go on a journey with you, and I want to see where that journey is going to take me musically. So that, fundamentally, you're getting together, either listening to the radio or going to a concert to experience a story. And that's part of every enterprise.
Right. And so it's about that weaving together of what you're proposing and not just having
Yeah.
willy-nilly.
And for concert presenter and radio too, it has to be excellent. The performance has to be extraordinary, and in order to give people an extraordinary experience, otherwise they're just going to stay away.
Right. But the extraordinariness of the performance alone is not enough. There also has to be that
Absolutely.
element of narrative or something being said within the music.
Yeah.
James, I know it's a little bit different for you, obviously, because you're not necessarily you are presenting music kind of in a different way. But like what piques your interest about a project? I know you're very busy and I'm sure approached by many people. Like what to you as a recording engineer makes a project exciting or really stand out?
Yeah, it is different because it really feels like sort of my role is like midwife of someone else's thing. Like I help someone make something that they're really passionate about making and then hand it off to the universe in a way that like other people I've sort of offloaded any of the responsibility for convincing people to listen to it.
Right.
Other than that, it stands on its own in some way that we're proud of. So really when I'm considering, yes or no to uh, a project that has come to me somehow. It's the nuts and bolts stuff of like, will schedules and budgets align? And then the core concerns are, is it people that I'm interested in working with and a project that I'm going to find interesting in some way? If
Right.
it feels like it won't be in any way exciting, it's hard for me to sign on with energy, like with an energetic presence. And I feel like if I can't
Yeah.
do that, I'm doing a disservice to both them and me. And if it's people that I've got a whole bunch of red flags about, um, I will probably talk about this with other questions later on, but one of my sort of core principles was to avoid desperation as much as possible. So I can make choices without like fear driving them. And so
Yeah.
like if I'm not worried that I'll be broke or careerless or whatever, if I say no to this gig, I can say no to the gig because I'm getting sort of personal red flags from people or something like that. And as
Right.
long as I can keep that true, it's really, yeah, the top concern is it people I want to work with?
Right. That speaks a lot actually to things we've been seeing coming through the day is that, the best marketing is to do good work and be a good colleague. And so much of whether or not you get future work down the road has to do with that. Because, if you're a pleasure to work with and you're good at what you do, it makes everybody else's experience much more pleasant. So I'm curious on taking it back a little bit for all of you. Like if you were, I know for example with Isaac, this wasn't necessarily the path that you initially intended on going with becoming a radio producer, which you do incredibly well. Uh, how, if you were going to give advice to a young person who is sitting here listening right now, thinking like, I would really love to get into broadcasting or sound engineering, but I don't really know where to start. Like, what would be your number one tip? And feel free, someone just jump in and we'll have a chat about it.
Sorry, Denise.
Go ahead. Don't.
No, I think look for any way to get started. Uh, if it's just even like writing a blog, talking to people. I think the first offer for me to write anything, it wasn't through CBC, it was through the Canadian Music Center, and
Yeah.
that was because I had been doing my master's thesis was on the centennial and the Canadian orchestral music of the Canadian centennial. So I'd spend a lot of time talking with people at the Canadian Music Center, and when the pandemic started, they wanted to, keep people busy, and I was one of the people that Matthew Fava at the time decided to reach out to and keep busy for at least a couple of weeks.
Right.
And that turned into a little bit of confidence to just start pitching around other, hey, I wrote this thing. Can I write something for you? And eventually had a bit of a portfolio that just kept building. And that was one thing that I was working on as I was still working on my other music things, working on other projects. And eventually I found a door that I didn't think was available to me.
Right.
But I had the confidence at that point through all these small steps to try to get in.
Right. So even though it wasn't like, I'm going to attend this program that's going to give me this degree to do this thing, there are other ways to do that with practical skills.
Yeah, and going back to what you said, it's about being open to people, being good to work with, and doing the work. Just getting the small things done and seeing where it goes.
Right. Denise, James, any thoughts on that question? Sort of where one might starting out on a career in broadcasting or engineering?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Back in the day when I first started at the CBC a century ago, there were two music producers in Regina. There were music producers in every single location across the country, often more than one. Um, and that was an incredible entry into this whole world that just doesn't exist anymore. Isaac is among the few people remaining at the CBC who does this kind of programming work. So that avenue is now closed to people, but I think the avenue that's always open and always should be open is, again, attach yourself to people. Come along. If somebody wants to sit and watch me produce a record, please do. You might be helpful. You might catch something I don't. Go invite yourself along with James and learn how to properly wrap a cable. Make yourself useful. If this is something you want to do, just start being the water girl in the local studio, because it's only by doing that you're going to be able to learn, unless you sign up for the McGill program, which is highly recommended by anybody who has dealt with those engineers and producers. But it's a pretty rarefied thing to be able to go to McGill and get taught by James. So if you're wanting to enter this world, just be a colleague.
Right. Often that first little step, it's a domino effect.
Yeah.
James, do you have a response to that? It is, I know, wonderful to work with you. And so I think Denise is right there. I'm sure any students who get to go to McGill are very lucky.
Yeah, it's when I was thinking about a career, from whatever it was, end of high school or something. I remember having conversations with my parents that, I'm sure a lot of people have had about, like, is this a fundamentally ridiculous plan that you have of following this arts passion?
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought I was gonna I had one target university program and no plan B through Z's whatsoever. If I didn't get into that one program, I was just going to go show up at a studio and mop bathrooms until somebody retired, and then, like, everybody bumped up a level, and then I was, mopping hallways outside the bathroom, and it was just like, I'll go to school in this one way that fits my budget and seems reasonable,
Yeah.
or I will just try to go out and get experience. And I think that's the key, is if you can get a jump start on sort of wisdom by going to school somewhere good that's not going to break you financially for the next 20 years, that's a great option. But really, the best wisdom comes from experience, and
Right.
getting experience is exactly what Denise and Isaac were saying, is go out there and do it as much as you can. And obviously that's going to be hard or unpaid early on. And so
Right.
the kind of path to success in doing that stuff is going to be through just paying attention, being reliable, being kind, being flexible, um, and yeah, connecting yourself to as many humans as you can in the music scene, because that network will just be sort of friendship and, you finding your soul in the world at first, but then eventually it will be what leads to a sustainable career.
Right. And while you're on the topic of qualities, you're talking about qualities, like, what I question for all of you is, how does your background as a performer, like the qualities of being a musician and what you learned, whether it's performing or just making music in your basement, whatever, how does that inform what you do now? Especially, I mean, Isaac, you are still very much a performer, both, conductor, composer, singer-songwriter, and then you do this broadcasting job. So how does that musical background affect you in your CBC role?
It's something that I how does it actually affect me? I do feel like I've learned to separate them a little bit more than I did in my first year or two,
Okay.
where I really wanted to come at things as a purely musical experience, but it's that understanding of story, as I mentioned earlier, like how important that is. But also then, the fact of being a musician means I go to concerts. I meet people, I talk to people, hear what they're interested in, hear what's exciting them, hear what's it's not about the actual like performance on my end. It's the fact that as a performer, I go and I meet other musicians. And since I'm not wearing the radio hat, I talk to them as a musician and get to know what's exciting them, what are they working on, what can I look forward to, and then hear more about like, oh, this hear about performers that I've never heard about before, or hear that
Right.
someone's got an album coming out down the road. It's that kind of the post concert hang that kind of feeds what I do in my day job.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. And also I feel like helps your level of appreciation also for what's being presented to you because you know the challenges and struggles that might have gone into creating that art in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
What about for you, Denise? I mean, you said, you trained as a violinist, but performance wasn't for you. How did that musical training propel you to where you are?
I think for all musicians, there are two fundamental uh, ways of doing things that will affect your future career, regardless of what you do. One is to be a good colleague.
Mhm.
You learn very much. I think every child in school should sing in a choir or play in a band, regardless if they have any talent or not, because you have to
Agreed.
learn how to work together with other people, which is essential. The second quality is being able to listen. For James, for all of us, the ears are the most important organ you have. You have to learn how to be discerning in what you're listening to, and being able to focus um, on what's working and what's not, and why. So those two things you really can polish as a musician and take into everything else you do.
Those are super wise words. I mean, I think listening and teamwork are really skills that apply to all professions.
Mm-hmm.
Words have not been said. What about for you, James? I think I remember reading in a bio of yours that you had so many different kind of musical interests you couldn't figure out how to bridge them. So how did that get you to where you are?
Um, Pretty quickly, I discovered that a thing that I could consistently be interested in was doing many different things. And so, like I was playing piano and saxophone, before I was making decisions for myself. And so they were enough to get me through music school and get to the point where I could start picking up other instruments. But I never had the passion to be the person practicing 8 hours a day
Mhm.
um, in a room alone. But I did have the passion to try and figure out every instrument I could get my hands on. And then play in as many different like genres or like configurations as possible. And all of that sort of became the fuel for my understanding of the people I work with. Like my ability to put myself in their shoes is a
Right.
real like daily pursuit for me. Like I literally will sit in the chair of the musician before they show up. Just, and it's practical things like to make sure there's not a poorly wrapped cable that they're going to trip over or a microphone that's going to hit them in the head, but also to get me in the mind space of what these people I'm going to collaborate with might be thinking, so I can start to anticipate those needs or sort of shape what I'm going to do that day around something that'll work for all of us. And
Right.
it really does, come from like the first time playing in a high school band ensemble where it's just like, how do you play in tune unless you can understand what you're doing and hear what's happening around you? And that paying attention to others, assessing what's coming from me, determining how much to put something out or how much to be taking something in sort of dynamically all the time, I think is, like you say, a professional skill in any trade, a
Right.
life skill in any human interaction, but like very much something musicians delve very deeply into, and that will help them in a whole bunch of other domains.
Yeah, I actually read something else that James said that I wanted to read because I think it's very beautifully worded. You said the nature of performing in an empty room for a collection of microphones is an unnatural experience for most performers, and in the grand timeline of human music making, still something very novel. Being a compassionate guide through that process is a responsibility I take very seriously. And I love that perspective of, you know, for anybody who has recorded or anybody interested in recording, we have this privilege of going into the studio and having these people who just have everything figured out. And I don't think we realize how much that actually goes into that process of making sure that everything is perfectly placed and easy for us so that we can do our very best job.
I think
And I
the
think,
lucky people like aren't aware. The unlucky people may not understand it, but they know that they hated an experience
right,
and that they've maybe been traumatized by an experience and maybe are going in with a lot of reluctance. And it's when you see that, it's like, if you analyze it, maybe if you understood what we understand, you'd be able to see all the things that went wrong that made your day terrible that time. And it's
right.
not just that recording sucks, it's that sometimes this unnatural experience can go bad.
Did you ever record as a young person in a recording situation that was not great and you took something away from that?
Not really, I guess, because the way I learned to do it was recording myself. So, or
Right,
at least I was inherently willing to be very forgiving about how bad it was because I was both the artist and the engineer,
right.
which made it, I guess, a sort of safe place to do a lot of experimenting. But definitely in my studies, I saw um, some like colleagues have really bad days. And I did do one session which is really memorable because we did two recording sessions in a studio like on back-to-back days, and the first one was great and everyone had a huge amount of fun, and the second one was everyone was having a total meltdown, and it was a really clear illustration of how like certain human communication issues, certain sort of like not technology issues,
Hmm.
can really make or break people's experience. And so being aware of that, like it doesn't take much to go from everyone's delighted and high off of this fun communal experience to everyone hates it and just wants to get out of there.
Right. I actually want to ask a similar question to Denise, because I mean you've also been in the recording and the producing engineering space. Like, what do you think is the most important quality, or the most important qualities for somebody who wants to go in to that industry for them to really be able to support the artists that they're working with?
You know, it's all about the psychology of the experience. So, assuming you have a James working with you and you can put the sort of technological worries aside, your job isn't so much, identifying the wrong notes or, the out of tune B flat in the third measure. It's about setting a tone and an atmosphere of encouragement and safety so that the artist can do everything they want without worrying that they're threatening something. I mean, they all go in and they see those horrible microphones hanging there and they think they have to be perfect. And the thing the producer has to do is set an environment where the musician can do their absolute best.
Hmm.
You do the worrying for them about so many other things, and you're there to encourage and to reflect back. But you have to read the room. And I'll tell you a little anecdote of a project I did. It was during the pandemic. But some musicians I was working with were at the Glen Gould studio in Toronto, and I was sitting here in my home office in North Vancouver, and I had the recording engineer on my laptop. I had the composer on my phone, and I had the musicians, seeing them on stage, and they saw me, a little screen sitting in a chair on the front of the stage.
Hmm.
And so we tried to, in the end, it wasn't a bad recording, but the problem I had was I couldn't read the room. I couldn't tell when the musicians were tired, when exhaustion had set in, when I needed to kind of get tough, when I needed to hold back. Because I wasn't in the same space. And even when you're producing, you're in a control room and the musicians are on the floor.
Yep.
There's a kind of communication that goes on. But
Right.
this was so alienating. And I realized, if I hadn't realized before, that my job wasn't, it was 90% of it was making sure that there was that comfort level and being fully engaged with the artist so that they knew that somebody was taking everything they did with focus and concentration.
Right. And I think again that's probably where also that musical background comes in, is that you can relate to how they're probably feeling in that moment and try to create a space that feels more comfortable for them. Looking at again all
Yeah,
these microphones
yeah,
and feeling like they have to be, perfect, which again is this concept that we overdo a lot, especially in classical music. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, Isaac, did you have anything to add to that?
Not so much. I don't do too much of the in studio work.
Mhm.
Occasionally, I get the chance to like a guest host or fill in on one of the other shows, and it's similar. In that you're working one on one with one person behind the glass, and it's the same thing. Just making sure that even when they're reading a script, and many people come in, that's not their first thing. They're musicians. They're great performers in other aspects, but reading a radio script is a very different thing. And
Yeah.
so sitting behind the glass and working with them, it is still about just making everyone comfortable, understanding how to give notes and get the best performance, but also take stress away from the environment. It's something that like that's where I feel like my experience as a conductor works really well with my
Hmm.
my work at CBC, being able to know how to work with a soloist. If I'm conducting a concerto, same thing as if I'm going to be conducting or directing someone in the studio. I use a lot of the same skills.
Right. With lots of overlap.
Yeah.
That pivots nicely actually to kind of the next part of the conversation I want to go to is obviously you all do a lot of different things. And I think that's the reality of today's 2026 musician, is that most people have a portfolio career where they're doing many different things as multiple sources of income and also just for their own creative fulfillment, as opposed to having like one full-time position somewhere. So a big question I think we get a lot from attendees and participants is how do you manage all that freelance work? Like how did you learn to balance your time, balance your budget? Where did those skills come from? What advice do you have there? James, let's start with you.
I got advice when I was a student from like a visiting mentor, which was basically, get a day job so that you can survive, but specifically not a day job that's going to kill your ability to do music stuff. And so actually, this was Jim Anderson, who's a prof and recording engineer down in New York, but he had a job working for NPR as a broadcaster. And so he was in music, interacting with musicians, being musical in his day job, so that he could then build up his portfolio of freelance clients, being a recording engineer, recording producer. Um, and so I was paying my way through school by working backstage in concert halls, as you well remember. And that was the perfect sort of foundation for flexibility and stability, because it was, variable hours per week, lots of downtime in the summer, lots of time off from it, and weird hours, weird varying schedules. So and really, I had great colleagues too who were willing to be flexible. So if I had a project where it was like, hey, I'm going to go be in a studio for a week or something, they're like, yeah, we can work around that, and you'll pull your weight in this job later. But something that was flexible, but it kept me hanging out with musicians, it kept me meeting new people, it kept me not losing my passion or energy for the freelance stuff, and flexible enough to do the freelance stuff.
Right.
Because it's a real trap to sort of get a day job where you're just, writing copy for a marketing firm or something, and that feels like it's got a sort of wicked gravity that pulls you away from
Hmm.
these passions. And then it's really hard to just be like, I'm going to be a full only paid to make music person,
Right.
because it's really hard. Everybody needs a side hustle or several side hustles until they have had enough time that the snowball starts rolling for itself.
Right.
So yeah, having some kind of way to stay stable financially, and available artistically, will let you build gradually in the more organic and sustainable way, so that 5, 10, 15 years into your career, it's now running itself, just because people who know people who know people who've worked with you are coming at you. But to
Right.
get there, it's you're either squeezing way too hard and forcing yourself in a way that's not appealing to a lot of people, or suffering nonstop because you're a broke starving artist really trying to make it work.
Right.
So coming up with some way to survive um, as just a living human with costs, I think will really enable a lot more.
In the trajectory of all of that, if you were to go back in time and tell like 15, let's say 15 years ago, and tell little James where you are now, do you think you would have believed it, or did it feel totally unachievable at the time?
It, I think it'd be interesting. I think if I could go back in time and talk to young James, like I'd maybe have, some like life skills and human interaction advice, which maybe he'd be like, "What are you talking about? I know everything. Don't worry, weird older version of me. It'll be fine." But mostly about sort of career plan and direction. I think we'd just be able to sort of hang out and have a beer and talk like colleagues. I don't think I've got too many insights that now that I would be totally surprised by 15 years ago.
Right.
Because it was just like, I'm gonna pay the bills however I can, do as much music as I can, and sort of follow the path of the opportunities that come to me.
Right.
So maybe I would have expected some different things. And that definitely I had more sort of outcome related ambitions back then, and now
Hmm.
I'm much more process
Right.
driven. Like if the process was good, if we had a good time making that record, if we are proud of what we've made, I'm happy. And if it doesn't get nominated for a whatever.
Right.
Whereas when I was young, I maybe had like benchmark achievements on a to-do list, and now it's
Right.
just like those are fun the same way finding a $5 bill on the road is fun. Like it doesn't make a difference, but maybe it lightens that day.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And I want to jump over to Isaac for a second because I think you said, pandemic sort of changed your path a little bit. How did you come out of school in the pandemic and then figure out this freelance life? What was that like for you?
Well, it really changed my relationship with my career in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
You know, my last semester was cut short by the beginnings. It was, March of 2020 was when I was getting ready to conduct some Beethoven and other getting my grad recital ready, getting all those other things ready.
Right.
I was in the home stretch and everything stopped, and I just went, I don't know if I'll be able to do this again. So I went to the singer-songwriter route and just picked away at that for a while, and brought into that skill. And then um, whenever something composition wise would come up, I would kind of pull back to that, and all of those experiences would feed into each other. Um, I write different music now, having
Mhm.
done the singer-songwriter thing for any concert music I write. Having done work as a singer-songwriter, my concert music is very different. Having known what it's like not to conduct for an extended period of time, whenever I'm conducting, I really do not take that for granted in the way
Right.
that I think I'd kind of, expected a career to roll out in front of me. Um, at the time when I was 19, 20, 21.
Right.
Uh, the wisdom of 8 years, it's different. Um,
It's true. It's
but
true though. It's really
yeah,
true.
and that's the other thing, is like I'm still really early in the whole in my whole career process. Like I
Right.
know that there's still so much to do, and so when I started working at CBC, I kind of pulled back from a lot of the artistic things I was doing because I needed to go, okay, this job is going to a it I love what I do. B, it's going to work very well for me to still be able to pursue everything else I do, but I have to do it the right way. I have to know where, and the right way changes day to day, but it is like knowing where the boundaries are within the corporation, where within my life, within artistic partnerships, all of those things. How much time can I guarantee each person, each project, in
Right.
addition to the time I need Monday to Friday to do what I do?
Right. And in a literal sense, when you're actually figuring out the amount of time, do you do that in a spreadsheet? Do you do that is it abstract? Is it,
I I have I'm a little, well, I'm not scatterbrained in that I let things go. It's that I keep everything in five different places. So
okay.
I do have deadlines that I keep in a calendar. I don't usually use spreadsheets. I use spreadsheets more for like large scale planning. And then when it actually comes down to one project, I will write myself. I have always have a notebook on me, and I will just write down every date I need to to meet on that, and the actual like physical act of writing it down
Mhm.
helps drill it into my memory. And
Yeah.
then I will add all those dates to my phone and add reminders at certain, like, a week or two before that something needs to be checked in on. And then just the paranoia of not meeting that deadline will keep me in track. It hasn't failed me yet.
I mean, it's a great system, and I mean, there's lots of neuroscience behind how important it is to actually write things down. And these are such important insights, I think, for people to hear because they're often not the things we learn when we're in school. We learn kind of to do the thing, which is often just to play the instrument, but not all of these details around like how do I do the rest when I graduate and I get into the world of music? Like how do I manage those things
Yeah,
without somebody looking over my shoulder? And I think that's a great way, and it sounds like it works.
it's working well.
You mentioned, the 8 years and the wisdom changing. So
Yeah.
that's a nice segue into Denise. I mean, Denise, you have many decades of wisdom in this career, and I'm curious for you, like what has freelancing looked like, and how has that changed? Obviously, you had a few full-time positions, but we're kind of in and out of them. Yeah, what is your relationship to freelancing?
Well, I essentially do three different things. I keep three different plates spinning in the air most of the time. The challenge for
Mhm.
me is I'm currently working on programming the season for my concert series for 27, 28. So I'm looking ahead, down 2 or 3 years. At the same time, I'm looking ahead to the concert I'm presenting tomorrow and making sure that, the sound guy is going to show up with the right microphones and that the musicians are going to arrive on the right ferry, and that's the immediate concern. Nobody should try and do this if you're a serious procrastinator
Right.
and you can't keep your schedule together. Isaac, I'm obsessive about writing things down, keeping lists, keeping different kinds of diaries. I'm a paper person, and I have a paper diary. I have the Google diary because when the internet goes down, what am I going to do? So I back everything up on paper because I don't trust my computer, which died
Mm.
4 minutes into the presentation this morning, and that's why I'm talking to you on my phone.
Fair.
You have to be obsessive about that.
Yeah.
And you cannot be a person who's able to let things slide, who kind of can put off the deadline and say, yeah,
Mhm.
and Isaac and I both know broadcasting is a real way of focusing your attention on time. Seconds count. Dead air is not allowed. And so you have to have and develop a really very acute sense of time and how long a task is going to take and how you're going to structure your day so you get through everything.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The spinning plates metaphor, I think, is very topical. Very topical. And we talk a lot too when we're talking about freelancing about these aspects of it can be stressful, it can be a lot, it can be a lot to manage. So I want to flip that around too and say, this idea of a portfolio career where you're doing lots of different things. Um, what do the three of you find the most fulfilling about your work? Like what makes you want to keep going to work every day? Denise, you're already unmuted, so why don't we start with you? What is most fulfilling?
Oh,
Could be any of your jobs.
well, two different aspects. The joy, and it is joyous, of actually being in a studio and engaging at a very fundamental level with a musician in crafting and creating a performance that's better than the one they think they could make. And then taking that material and massaging it in the editing process and the mixing process and finding that jewel. Oh my God, it doesn't get much better than that. And when the music is glorious and the performances are incredible, to have had a little role
Right.
in making that live is for me beyond joyous. Um, going to one of my concerts and sitting in the audience and realizing that I have shared magic with a few hundred other people who would never have had that experience otherwise. That's the joy, and that's what feeds the soul. And you were
Right.
talking, I'm sure we'll get to the whole question about success, and I think James mentioned it before. It has absolutely nothing for me. Winning a Grammy was great. I'm
Mhm.
not going to deny that. But that's the icing on the cake. If you, it, we're so lucky in this world to be able to do this work. And if you can find joy in that work, there is absolutely nothing better, and you will have a great life.
That's beautiful, Denise. It really is. Like perfectly said. Really beautiful, just about helping other people be at their best and share what the
Mm.
whole point of music is, right? That connection. Isaac, what about for you? What's the most fulfilling part of your job? Or any
I
of your jobs? You wear so many hats.
Well, I'll talk about the CBC music one,
Mhm.
which is that there are so many fulfilling parts to it. Uh, but I think it's knowing that what we put on the radio does have an impact to listeners and to artists. That when we play something, people write in and say, and like if there's something that really strikes people, whether they like it or not. That's the other thing is I am okay to play something that maybe is off-putting to some audience members, but at least they listened. That people are
Hmm.
still engaging with things, and I think
Yep.
especially in an increasingly isolated time where people don't want to look past or feel uncomfortable in anything, that people care so deeply about what they are hearing and that we can share in that moment together, whether we agree on it or not, uh, is a really rewarding part of it. Also, when we just tell a really great story, when, for example, Tom Allen and I will put together weekly feature where we look at one event in the history of from like 1870 till 1939 and find like one thing and illustrate it with music and tell a story over the course of an hour. And when
Hmm.
we feel like we've done a good job and we get responses from the audience, that is the reason that we've done that whole thing, that we put so much work into it and it's accepted and people feel the solace, the companionship, that they feel the connection that you might more easily feel in a concert hall because we just feel like we're sometimes going into the void.
Right.
But then also when artists write us and say thank you for playing my music, it I got this concert offer after someone had heard it, or I've had composers reach out and say, after you played my piece, I got approached with a commission offer. Like all those things do happen, and I like being just that part that connects the audience to the performer, the audience to the musician to the market, however that we want to view that. But that point of connection through radio, that's
Yeah,
that's what
it's
excites me.
huge. It's huge. And I think also often sometimes that point of connection doesn't exist actually in the concert hall because there's no conversation happening between the artists on stage and the people in the audience, and we lose that sense of why music has this sort of like shared humanity, you know? So I think that's really beautiful what you do. And I know I'm a big fan of all of those CBC shows. So
Thank you.
they definitely matter and they definitely touch a lot of people. James, for you, what's the most fulfilling part? I mean, I know you again, we can talk it from the lens of recording, but also from the lens of educating, because obviously you're shaping the next generation of sound engineers at McGill.
Yeah. Um, as a freelancer, when I'm working on projects, I mean, I think along with a lot of other people, everything Denise said really, really resonated, and I think we see eye to eye on so much of that, like at our core. I am realizing more and more I have this other life where I do a lot of mountaineering and sort of mountain adventure stuff, and I'm realizing that maybe I'm drawn in both cases to embarking into a situation that's maybe quite pressure laden, and I really like the challenge of being in that sort of pressure situation and then the exhilaration of arriving at a place afterwards where we can all look at each other and be like, oh heck yeah, we
Yeah,
did
also,
something cool, like, and it's when we've made a record, when we feel like we captured a performance, like that's really exciting to feel like we made something. And I get a lot of joy out of having people be thrilled by the process, be thrilled by how that all went. And the teaching is really the same, where if I can have that moment of sort of discovery with
mhm.
a class or a student where they have a sort of like light bulb moment, and or where they give me a light bulb moment, because it happens both ways. It's a really kind of incredible learning environment to be a part of, and I'm addicted to that because it keeps me sort of questioning and questing. But yeah, seeing someone else light up and having been a part of that is really addictive, um, and delightful.
Yeah. And also, I feel like it never gets old.
Yeah,
And I can tell too,
absolutely.
Denise still saying after all these years in the industry, watching, an artist have their moment on stage, it's still just as thrilling because it's so meaningful, which is
Mm.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
If I may just jump in,
Yeah.
one of the things that I realized, I started out in life wanting to be a journalist. Yeah, that's not a growth industry either. But one of the reasons I kind of transitioned from that to working or tried entering this field is that as a journalist, you're always responding to something that somebody else does.
Right.
This world gives you a chance to make things. And I was never going to be a great musician. I knew that. And fortunately, unlike some people, I knew that when I was of an age when I could choose something else. But the idea that you could engage in a profession or a way of life where you help actually create and shape things without necessarily being the musician yourself is fantastic. And for all those people who are doubting whether music is their path, there are just so many other ways of being in music, which is exactly what your presentation is all about. And I
Mhm.
hope people will think seriously about recording and presenting because it can be so incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah, you make me want to go, you make me want to get into it. The passion is absolutely contagious. Um, so before I get into the last question, we will do the last chunk of the session will be Q&A, and I see a bunch of questions, so please keep them coming. Take this opportunity in the Q&A box to ask these wonderful experts about anything. They're very generous with their wisdom. But one of the things that we're trying to address with this conference is that, lots of times in school there are only a few paths that are provided to you. So, as a classical flutist, it's sort of like, well, you can win a job in an orchestra, or, you can go into trying to get an orchestral or a university teaching position, and that's sort of it. And I know that's not true. I think we all know that's not true now, but, my definition of what I thought success, the only options for success were when I was 18, is very different than what I think success is now. So this is the sort of the two rapid fire questions I'm asking everybody today is, what is your definition of success now in your life, in music, whatever? And has it changed from when you were 18 years old, starting off on your path, whether that was in music school or not in music school? Let's start with Isaac, because you were probably most recently 18 of any of us. Uh,
Right.
has that definition of success changed for you, and what is it now?
It's absolutely changed. I think at that time, as I mentioned earlier, like I did think that there was one direct career path, or you know, even if I would say at the time, no, I know that there's going to be different building blocks to a career, and it's not going to take one specific shape. I'm going to have to wear multiple hats that are all going to be uh, um, I think being both a composer and a conductor will be enough to be successful,
Right.
without any of the actual understanding of what steps that takes for success. I didn't really define what success was, and I think now success is being being in the process. I think again, going back to just the experience of finishing school into the pandemic,
Hmm.
having that sense of free fall that came with that, of just knowing that there was suddenly a time when I was doing nothing. I really appreciate doing something whenever I can just have something else on the calendar,
Right.
something uh something to keep the snowball rolling. I a composition teacher of mine, I remember when I was in high school, he told me that a goal he set for himself was one new performance a year just to kind of get started. And that's kind of what have for myself, one new piece. And maybe for conducting, well, okay, I work with this group and let me see if I can add one more thing next year, one new experience next year.
Right.
And it's not just those small things will add up. And I think understanding how large those small steps can feel is what I
Right.
think success is.
So and maybe focusing more on the growth aspect of it as opposed to the
The end
outcome
goal. Exactly.
aspect. Yeah. I love that. I think that's beautiful. James, you kind of already started touching on this a little bit earlier in terms of, your outlook saying that it used to be about like the endpoint of a Grammy or a Juno or whatever, but now it's more about that process. Can you tell us what little James's definition of success might have been compared to what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like the high school version of James was like gonna move to LA and make rock records for a living, and be sort of showered in glory and Grammys.
Right.
And then that sort of like turned more into um, just making records for a living, because I was seeing a lot of people who had those aspirations having to move off into that the side hustle that sustained them became their main hustle, and they were working in retail or consulting or sort of corporate IT or something like that. And I sort of felt
Hmm.
like if I can be making records for a living and showered in Grammys and Junos and glory, that would be great. And yeah, now it's definitely more. And also maybe I had youthful goals about how many people would consume the work that I was making.
Right.
Um, hitting as many listeners as possible, kind of thing. And now it's much more my sort of definition of success comes from that the people I worked with on making the thing were thrilled by the process. The ultimate success is when someone I work with is excited to work with me again sometime. And like that's a helpful thing to prioritize, because that is how you get more jobs. Usually it's from that network
Hmm.
of colleagues, that network of peers and other professionals. But yeah, it really is that sort of, if I felt good about how the making of it went, then I'm happy.
Right. And I think too, it's an interesting thing, like you said, the jobs are coming from the networking. In music, it's less about how many degrees you have. Like, how often is it that you have a master's in sound recording? Is that the reason that you got the job? Like, I assume much less often than the fact that you do good work, right?
Yeah, it almost entirely in my academic side, those degrees mattered. So if I
Yes.
wanted teaching jobs, the
Yep.
fact that I could show that I had some accreditation or whatever like helped. But on the professional side, I've even seen places where the idea of someone having certain degrees or a certain level of book smart education would be something that turned people off. They were like, oh
Hmm.
no, you're going to be a know-it-all, or you're going to be rigid and inflexible, or you're going to be too posh or too stuck up or too whatever. Like there was like a sort of certain expectation from some places that maybe those things really set you on one kind of path only. And so demonstrating flexibility, demonstrating adaptability, and really just, yeah, having worked with people really was the biggest thing. There was early on, it felt like if I was trying to get good jobs, they had to come from like elders in the field.
Right.
Um, and that sort of finding some way to be called upon by them was really important.
Hmm.
And very soon after starting my career, it became clear that sure, that can lead to one or two nice things, but what's sustainable is that the people you came up with are interested in supporting you, interested in working with you, and that sort of that network of peers is the sustainable part of a career. And it may not be the first step, but it's definitely the long step.
Yeah, it's the future of the industry, right?
Yeah.
That's very insightful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Denise, let's before we get to the Q&A, let's end with you. So for you, how has your definition of success in life and music changed from 18 until now? Maybe it hasn't, but I'm betting it has.
Yeah, maybe. Well, not as much, I don't think. I didn't really think about success in specific terms, but I just kind of fell into jobs. I kind of bobbed around like a bit of a rubber ducky, kind of trying to going here, there, and yon, and trying to just navigate the world and be able to keep my the roof over my head. But I think so much of what James said, I agree with. And my definition of success now is so entirely uh, based on the idea that I have a good reputation, that
Mhm.
people want to work with me and they want to work with me again, and that my reputation. I think people have to be honest. They have to be good colleagues. they have to be collegial, and to get the feedback that those I am those things in the musical community in Canada makes me feel successful. And it, yeah, the Grammy and the Junos are great, but again, as James said, it's being known as a good collaborator, and that people will hire you again,
Right.
because they trust you.
Yep, absolutely. And you are a joy to work with, Denise, so you have succeeded. I want to thank you all again for sharing your insights and your honesty and your wisdom. I know that this is really going to resonate with a lot of our participants who are trying to figure these things out for themselves in real time. I'm going to move to the Q&A because we have some really great questions. You can still feel free to submit them for these last 20 minutes. Okay, let's start with, there's a couple of very specific sound questions, James, I know you've been sort of addressing in the background, so I'm going to keep to some of the more general ones. This is interesting. So Joel Blackshaw asks, to anyone, what do you see as the current weak points in the Canadian music industry landscape? What are the gaps that organizations, artists, venues, and performers that you see could use the most help from the more business-minded industry professionals? So are there things in the music industry that could use some outside help from other industries? Or perhaps it's in the way that artists are presenting themselves where they could use some help. Any thoughts?
One thing I would offer, is that I think too often in this classical world, we approach concert presentation as kind of a chore, and that people are there in a very engaged and serious kind of way, but God, don't expect anyone to have fun. I think we all take it way too seriously, and the whole idea that artists are now actually encouraged to speak to audiences and have an engagement level with audiences. But so often, even going to an orchestral program, people come slouching out on stage, and the brass guy is got a phone on his music stand, and all of that. Stop it. Come to a performance like you would rather be doing this than anything else in the world. I think that would go a long way to making our world more appealing to a lot of people.
I agree. That's what I was alluding to earlier. I think that there is sometimes still a divide between what's happening on stage and the experience of the audience, and that connection is sometimes lacking. So, Isaac, James, any thoughts or similar sentiments to Denise?
I have like not wanting to sort of veer off into the maybe more political, but I think when I said have a side hustle that's not going to eat your soul,
Hmm.
if there was just something like a universal basic income where
Yeah.
any aspiring artist could survive, like maybe bare minimum, but could survive without needing to abandon their artist career at the early stage where it's not lucrative and
Hmm.
just could be creative a lot of the time, I think we'd end up with like a hugely vibrant art scene. Like it's already great and it's already like there's a good funding and things are worse in many other places. But I think
Yeah.
if just it was easier to survive with like sort of the bare essentials covered and then be creative beyond that without having to sort of fight to survive,
Yeah.
I think that would be a huge thing.
Yeah. Or to end up with similar money that sports has, but for for the arts. All right, let's move on to another one of our questions. Okay. Um, there's a question from Simon Bannerman for Isaac. How often does the frequency of commissions for compositions differ in that part of your career? So I think he's asking how often um, commissions come up for you.
I uh I'm not a great composer in that regard, where I actually write a lot on spec or just for friends or as favors, just to kind of keep things going for myself at this point. I haven't received a whole lot of commissions, and that was a thing in my career before I started working and after I've started working. It's just the which allows me also to still classify myself as a emerging composer. I don't have any establishment. I'm not getting Canada Arts Council grants. I haven't before, and I haven't since. Um, so I think it's just how much work you're putting into that side of your career. That being said, I still have performances of my work, and I have some things kind of in the works, but it's everything is slower. Every I can only work on one or two pieces a year, maybe three, but that's also because I'm just doing it myself as opposed to uh, working with a larger institution or even a private commission of some kind.
Right, because those partnerships tend to be very important in doing a lot of commissions.
Yeah.
Also sounds like you've got a pretty full plate with all of your your projects as it is.
I like to keep busy.
Yeah, very clearly. All right, thank you so much for that answer, Isaac. Let's get another one of these questions going. So, you answered that one. Uh, this may be a question for James. From David Bricino. How does the rock scene look today? As a guitarist, is there a sustainable way to make a living in the rock genre?
I mean, I'm not super well informed. Really, a lot of my professional work is it's probably like half classical, a third film music, and then whatever else is happening. But it seems to me like it's fairly similar to classical and more academic music types where, maybe there is some huge audiences for a few people and not really any income for anyone from just people listening to your music on streamers, but huge opportunities for connecting directly to people who care about you in varied ways. And so I think it's sort of fairly similar to just like being flexible and putting a lot of effort into meaningful connection with like-minded people who can either collaborate musically or pay attention to your music as an audience. Um, and yeah, like with the classical world, there's side hustle opportunities in teaching people what you can already do, in accompanying people who are trying to do their own thing, and in any of these sort of music fields like the recording or broadcasting or organizing, and sort of being that person who wears many hats, I think is really the modern way to make it work, unless you're a big gambler and you want to put all of your eggs into that one long shot of inheriting Taylor Swift's empire.
Hmm. That's a very specific basket, I think. But I like what you said too, James. I mean, I think the benefit, as you've all already illustrated too, is that the more things you do, the more you end up learning from those things that then apply to whatever the other goal was. Like, I know for me, I never thought that I was going to do a lot of teaching because I didn't think I was a great teacher. But in the end, it turned out to be the thing that made me learn the most about being an artist. And I love it. I'm still growing from teaching every single day. It totally informs everything I do in every other aspect of my career. So I think across genres, there's a lot of similarities in that sense.
Can I add one thing to that as well?
Yes,
It
please.
um thinking cross genre, like it's also important, I think, especially today, to know to be somewhat conversive in multiple different genres. I know we're
Hmm.
talking a lot of classical music, but if you're playing rock music, make sure that you're also comfortable like subbing in for are you playing blues? Are you playing hard rock, metal? Are you gonna sub in for a pop gig? Can you play classical? Can you sub in for a jazz gig? Like knowing how to have at least a little fluency in all those different genres could help you open up those various streams of income and opportunities as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. One question here from the panel from Josh Rao. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing any last names. Um, he asks, "What keeps you all inspired?" It's a great question. I know James talked a little bit about his mountaineering uh, side hobbies. Are there other things for you, James?
The teaching is huge.
Mhm.
Project to project, it's really great, and working with artists who are really into their vision. Um, but a big part of what I bring to those projects is that really support role, that sort of midwife thing I was talking about, where it's like I'm
Mhm.
gonna be what they need me to be on this project. And so I have a lot of professional integrity like objectives, but in terms of is it inspiring or not, it almost feels like, do I like how do I feel about my sister's character or something. It's like, well, I feel like she's my sister and I love her no matter what. Like that's how I feel about the projects I'm working on,
Yeah.
a lot of the time. But with students, the fact that they're sort of coming in and they're energized, and they have so many new questions or new ideas or so many different paths that they're thinking of or wondering about. um I feel like I'd have to be like made out of stone not for that to be exciting,
Hmm.
and to make me want to like be awake in response to that and in the face of that. And so that really keeps me, sort of, yeah, bright-eyed. I think is like seeing someone's bright eye, or a room full of people's bright eyes looking back at me. It's like, oh yeah, that's
Yep.
it is a great thing to be doing. This is really cool. Let's talk about how great this is. Let's try and build fun things for us all.
Collective energy.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. What about for you, Isaac, Denise? Anything that keeps you inspired, whether it's something within your career or just something else entirely in life?
You know what? One of the things I have the most fun with, and I look forward to doing, is these crazy little bios, because so many musicians have such terrible bios, and it allows. I've developed a process where I get to know people on a fairly intimate level in terms of
Hmm.
asking questions and discovering their background and their history, and being able to share insights into why they are musicians and how they are musicians and what music means to them, and to be able to explore that with people I don't necessarily know all that well, but it gives me an entree into creating a weird kind of friendship with
Mm.
people who become my pals because they trust me to tell me their story and to tell me their story in a way that I can share with other people. And I didn't think it was going to be this much fun, but it's really great. I just love doing it. And anybody, and I don't have a website. People come to me because there's word of mouth that says, here's somebody who can help you with a recording, or here's somebody who could help you with a bio. I've had a good experience. And the bio thing is just so much fun.
I can vouch personally, I know Denise through the bio writing process. If anybody is looking for that service, she is the person to go to because it really does helps you learn to understand yourself, I think. And maybe Isaac, something you can speak to as somebody who's trying to choose artists to present. I think a lot of people don't know what their why is or really who they are, and it's very difficult to convince someone else about that if you don't fully understand what it is for yourself. Like if you don't know what it is that motivates you to be an artist, like why you're a musician, what it means to you, it's very difficult to sell that. So I love the bio process because it asked a lot of very sort of in-depth questions about like why are you doing this? Why are you not doing something else?
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, so many people that I work with have discovered they've gone through school, they've started their piano or violin lessons when they were 5 years old,
Mhm.
they've gone through high school, they've won the Kiwanis Festival things, they've gone and won a few more competitions, and they're in university and they've got a degree and maybe they're doing, but never once. And school doesn't allow people or encourage people to just sit back and say, why am I doing this? What's it for? What's it uh, what joy am I getting from doing this? And those sorts of questions have to be asked. And if you don't know those questions and become a professional musician and you haven't come to terms with the kind of musician you want to be, I think you're going to be in for a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So do it now.
Yeah. I agree. I'm seeing some questions in the chat actually of how we connect to Denise. So just shoot us an email at wheremusicleads@gmail.com after, and we'll get you connected or go through our website. Isaac, I saw you nodding to everything that was just said.
I mean, how could you not agree with what was just said? No, it is still, it's so important to ask yourself why you're doing these things. Like, why do you put so much energy in? Being a musician is a hard thing to do. Um, Going through school, going through the intense scrutiny that we have in almost every step of the process. Uh, and sometimes we just do it because we know that we can do it, we can get through it. But being able to actually ask ourselves what motivates us is it's a hard question to answer, but it's worthwhile. And it's going to change throughout everyone's
Right.
life. It's changed throughout mine. I'm sure it's changed throughout all of yours as well.
Yeah.
uh yeah, I think that's a really, really, I mean, I'm gonna walk away thinking more about that from today.
Amazing. Yes. I think we all are.
Yeah.
Did you I while we're with you, Isaac, is there something in particular that keeps inspiring you?
Uh, I think it is like as James said, as Denise has said, like it's about knowing people. Like find music is a communal thing,
Right.
and finding the different communities in different ways, and hearing what other people are up to, and like feeling that energy of the communal experience is something that just excites you, and you want to bring it. I want to bring that to whoever I'm going to be bringing it to, whether it's you know if I go to a concert and I hear someone talking about something interesting and I go to work the next day and I say we should play this on the radio, this might be
Mhm.
interesting, or I'm hearing someone asking a question and I have an answer for it. I'm like, yo, you should check this out or be in touch with this person. Or if I'm in a rehearsal and I can bring an excitement of something or someone else's, I can feel someone else getting excited about the process.
Right.
That just keeps it all going and inspired and excited for the next day's work.
Yeah. I think that's how generally we all feel now these days when we're connected with anybody because there's so much in the world that's going on that feels so scary and uncontrollable. But this is a beautiful way to feel like a part of something, I think, with others. It's very energizing. We'll ask one last question before we wrap up, which is another one from Josh. What was the most valuable lesson you've learned in your career? I love this as a last question. And I think for most of you, the answer was probably already that, being a good colleague is kind of thing number one. So let's say, other than that, what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned in the course of your career? With James, we'll start with you. I know it's a big question. You can take a
Um,
moment to think about it.
yeah, well, and it's I'm gonna connect it to the other another question Josh had that I saw that was for me about what's my secret go-to weapon for mixing. Because the lesson that I learned, I think, is basically what my answer to that question is. And the sort of analogy I'll make is if you think about restaurant work, like the finest kitchens on the planet, maybe a couple of them have some like magic science infuser or some like sonic shower, whatever for their thing, but mostly it's just like they've got fire, they've got knives, and they're making something out of the best ingredients they can find using their imagination. And for me, the lesson that I learned, I think, was other than the like, yeah, don't be a jerk, be reliable. And then the tiny third priority is be excellent at what you do. The way to be excellent at what you do, I think, is to do less but better. And so my secret tools are just like my ears and my imagination, like having a plan and knowing what music sounds like, and then sort of not trying to get too complicated and like too fixated on sort of shiny things that show up, but really just aiming for the core of that goal of like, is what I'm doing making music? um and in my imagination I spent, like ever since I was a child, I didn't realize at the time, but it was still career building. I spent a ton of time thinking about music and imagining music and being inspired to feel a certain or every way by the music I was listening to, and all of that lives in me. And so when I'm faced with a situation, I try to bring all that out in the simplest, purest way in the face of whatever the situation is. So it's basically it's a do less but better,
Mhm.
and just have an idea of what music sounds like and use your imagination, engage with your imagination to go there.
That's beautiful. Imagination and creativity. Gotta like block out all the noise to get there, right? Isaac, what about for you? Biggest lesson you've learned?
Um, that how would I phrase this? It's important to do what you can to lift everyone else up. Like you never know,
Mhm.
especially with social media, you can look on online and and going back to the question about how often I compose or deal with commissions, I never do, but then I look online and I see people I grew up with or went to school with who have, this great slate of commissions and I go, oh, that should have been me. But it's so easy to like be jealous and I have to pull myself out of that. And the better thing to do is tell people how exciting it is that that person is doing what they've trained for and what
Mhm.
they have worked really hard for, and in my own way find a way to support them, even if it's just encouragement, because showing up and being there gets people to do the same for you. You can build the community by just being there. You cannot expect it to form around you.
Right. There's a word I learned. Many of us know the German word Schadenfreude, which is taking joy in someone else's pain, but there's also a word Freudenfreude, which is sharing in everyone else's joy. And I think that's exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about, right? Is like even when it's maybe not things are not going so well for you, there is beauty in being part of that community and enjoying what they're doing and knowing that it's about them in that moment.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful, Isaac. Denise, let's have you bring it home. Most valuable lesson you've learned in your career.
Uh, there's not one single one. I can think of three actually. One is be prepared.
Mm,
You know, whether you're performing or producing or whatever, just do the work and do it well, and don't show up and let people down. One thing I've had to learn more and more as a totally freelance is to learn to say no, which
mm,
is something we're always afraid to do because, oh my God, if I turn this down, is the next gig going to come around? You have to know what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and the people you want to work with, and the people that maybe, yeah, not so much. And the other one is listen. You know, we live in a world where nobody's listening to each other. And that is listening is at the core of everything we do as in this world. It's our secret sauce. And I think people should just learn how to listen better and listen more, whether it's a question of, playing on stage or being in a control room or talking to the clerk at the grocery store. Everybody should just listen and shut up, We have too much me.
I love that.
Sorry.
Denise, your passion is contagious. That's great. All right, we have come to the end of our session. So first and foremost, I want to thank all of you, Isaac, Denise, and James, for your time today, for your wisdom. I know how much all of us appreciate your honesty in talking about these things because a career in music, as I imagine a career in anything, is not a linear path. And it's really important for us to have these conversations and share the trials and tribulations and what we've learned from them. So thank you with for your generosity with all of that. I want to thank, of course, also everybody who attended today and for your fantastic questions. I love what an engaged audience you were. And I hope that you'll be back for tomorrow. We'll be back at the same webinar link at 10 a.m. for a session called It Didn't Go According to Plan When Detours Become the Destination. And that is featuring artists who maybe thought they had a certain plan in mind and ended up instead becoming a Tony-winning Broadway musical director or a touring folk musician or an orchestral librarian. Those are all the exact examples of the people that you'll hear from tomorrow. So again, Where Music Leads, National Youth Orchestra of Canada, we thank you very much for being here today. We wish you a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you all at this exact place tomorrow at 10 a.m. EST. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.